Welcome to a new daily top Askreddit video. Today's topic. There's a minimum age for certain political jobs. How would you feel if there was a maximum age limit? The Age Discrimination in Employment Act of 1967 would prevent any legislation on age caps for any jobs, but oddly enough, if you are under 40 you are not covered by this anti-discrimination law. I find it odd that an anti-discrimination law would so very clearly discriminate on the very thing it aims to prevent discrimination on. That is weird lol. Everyone is equal. Except you, and you. Some are more equal than others. Yes. But many believe it takes a 70 to 88-year-old to make decisions in a world that's rapidly changing. They've had their eras. And you wonder why things haven't changed for many. I don't think a 70 to 88-year-old should be legislating regulation and laws for new technology when they can't open their email on their BlackBerry. But that's just me. You're exactly right. I'm 50, I want to see 30 and 40. Something's making those decisions. Fresh outlook, new ideas. The problem is this ignores that truth about politics: it's up to the people. Is a candidate too old? That should be up to the voters. Is a candidate qualified? Should be up to the voters. There is no set of rules that can protect a population from an apathetic and irresponsible electorate. We have a lot of relatively young politicians that are mentally incompetent and or corrupt, but that's because they represent bad voters. Unless more and better people commit to participating in the process, as it is, it won't get better. There is no magic rule, and the system isn't going to fix itself to become good enough to worth voting in. Spot on. People keep thinking about government like there is some panacea that can cure all social ills if applied correctly, while the best way to address many of those ills is for ordinary voters to act more responsibly. Countries with proportional representation in government are happier than countries without, almost without exception. It doesn't solve all ills, but it seems to at least allow solutions to a lot of them. Term limits maybe. Term limits would solve the problem of the out-of-touch elderly making laws for the rest of us until they croak. I vote term limits. Term limits also cause the problems of politicians focusing on their career after politics because they know it's fleeting, so they focus on helping co-portatios for a nice cushy job afterwards. Edit, I know some do it already, but it would be a bigger issue. That would be a slippery slope to travel on. For one thing, the older you get, the less you are in touch with what younger people see as problems in our society. If we set up a maximum age, then that would nip that problem in the bud. But on the other thing, experience is everything. Hypothetically, if you had to choose between someone who has big ideas, but has very little idea on how to implement them, with no experience in politics, over someone who is experienced, had a few bad calls but overall worked for his constituents and is able to better life for them, you would probably choose the latter over the former. I feel like it would be beneficial if we would instead create a program that introduces people who would want to become an elected official, what the jobs entail, and how it works when you are in the position. This would better give younger people a more even chance at rivaling older politicians for elected positions. I absolutely want a mix of youth and experience. But right now we are tipped way too heavily to one side. Yep, career politicians who've never had real jobs outside of politics shouldn't exist. We need diversity of thought in the lawmakers, not just by inviting in special advisors who are experts in their fields then ignoring their advice, as the UK govt loves to do. That sounds good in principle, but career politicians can have their place. It is important to make sure that there are people in place that actually understand the processes of government well. Now sure, you can have civil servants and things, but at the end of the day the people running the country need to know what they are doing. On the one hand, I see your point about politicians who have no real-world experience and a much narrower understanding of the real world, but at the same time a career politician develops a lot of skills which someone from outside of politics wouldn't have and would have to learn. Also, anyone from outside politics who goes into it is going to struggle to go back to a non-politics job, outside of a very narrow range of employment options. That would prevent a lot of people from those jobs from going into politics, especially if they knew it'd be temporary and they'd be taking a massive hit to their career opportunities. I dunno, it's a tricky problem. Only real solution I can think of is obligatory retirement at a certain age or something. They get to have their government pension at sea to offset any impact on their careers, but can't stay on past, to give one possibility, 65. We're sick of experts. Look where that's got us. I'd make it similar to how some places require elderly people to retake their driver's test to keep their license. Sure, an 80-year-old could be capable of legislating, but can he remember the name of the county seat he's representing? I'd make it similar to how some places require elderly people to retake their driver's test to keep their license. That just sounds like re-election. I meant something closer to a competency exam, because my only concern with very old people holding public office is decline in physical and mental faculties. In a happier world, incompetent people just wouldn't get re-elected. You're right. And I hope we get there. I disagree with any minimum or maximum age limit. People should be able to vote whoever they want to. There's a reason that we don't let 10-year-olds drive. There's a statistical age range where we view people as responsible enough and intelligent enough and developed enough to engage with society and potentially endanger it. For an age cap to take effect, there would need to be a statistical Kogisarchi study to establish the top age of typical, probable, decline. Once that's established, then we cap it there, and don't permit holding office or driving or whatever after that age. Will some people be okay after the age cap? Yes. Are some 13-year-olds smart and responsible enough to drive a car? Yes. But we don't let them because we have an established and accepted norm. I'm personally all for it, but it needs to be supported with math and evidence that certain age groups cause societal harm after a certain peak. If a 10-year-old actually received a majority of votes in an election, I say let them have the office. It's not like passing a driving test because being elected reflects the will of your constituents, at least sort of. So it's not a 10-year-old making the decision, it's the voters. The problem with term limits is that it encourages short-term thinking and planning. The problem with no term limits is it allows people like Strom Thurmond to exist. Strom Thurmond existed because he consistently represented the views of the people of South Carolina. I don't want either. Most political jobs should be decided by the will of the voters. If the voters want a really young person, so be it. If they want a really old person, then so be it. Doesn't matter if they are a bad choice. Democracy is a package deal and you take the good with the bad. Ideally yes, but incumbents have such an advantage that term limits could be a stopgap until election laws and corruption from money in politics are corrected. I suppose I am in favor of term limits, which kind of goes against the principles I just supported. Sounds good. I always thought government needed some young blood, and by that I mean folks who didn't protest the Wright brothers plane. Confounded whippersnappers using devil contraptions to fly. I say that after a certain age, you have to prove that you're fit for the job, i.e. are not suffering from disorders such as dementia, every time you run for the position. Age itself isn't the issue, but then again that's just my opinion. I'd say that proof of ability should be mandatory for anyone and any age running for re-election. You can have an impaired 35-year politician and a mentally sharp 70-year politician. If we go that route, they should have to be tested every 6 months. They could start going senile halfway through their term. Fair, as long as you do the test for people of all ages. You can't just leave something too important up to a small, special set of doctors. You'd need a way for the whole of society to come together and express their judgment of whether that person is qualified for office. Maybe a couple of days after every other Halloween would be a good time. Just spitballing here. Whether you are talking about Mitch McConnell or Nancy Pelosi, I think the US could benefit from a slightly younger legislature than 70. I think term limits are a good start for both sides. Agreed. I'm more concerned with top political posts not requiring mandatory previous experience in an elected office. I sincerely believe that not just anybody should be able to run for the highest offices in a country. I don't think it's okay to limit democracy. Aside from certain old people who have mental problems, I don't think we should put max age limits. Because you could have a perfectly functioning man or woman who could be banned from entering politics just because they are old. I think minimum age limits are okay. You're still forming your personality until you get to your mid-20s. 25 is a great age to start. And at 80, you are losing your personality due to mental decline. The street goes both ways. Either age limits are wrong, or they aren't. Except unlike when you're young and developing, it's perfectly possible to keep your faculties all the way to the day you die of old age. I don't feel that someone who isn't in touch with modern life should be in control of our livelihood. Clearly their electorate does though. If they're in office, they won an election. Or no one ran against them. Representatives represent the people who elected them. If population Q wants an old representative, what right do the rest of us have to say, no, you can't do that, we don't like what they are going to do? Then don't vote for them. I don't feel that you have the right to tell other people who can and can't represent them. Super ageist.